Welcome into another edition of the Good and Plenty podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Goodman, and I'm here with my co-host / producer, Chris Grenham, and we got plenty to talk about today. Plenty to talk about, but I think the first thing we got to start with, Chris, is the inept offensive performance by none other than NC State.
It was better than the Super Bowl. It was better than that. I mean, you got more points than the Pats and the Rams, that's for sure.
Man, they were both – like I was watching that game, that first half, and I felt bad because I felt like midway through the first half, the players, you could tell it was just in their heads. They were just throwing the ball up, and it's almost like they were playing volleyball. Throw it up and just pray that it went in. But 24 points against a Virginia Tech team that didn't have their best player in Justin Robinson. And the good thing was
it was bad.
They guarded. At least NC State guarded a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, it was almost kind of like you said. It was like uncomfortable to watch because sometimes you can tell from the get-go if a team's got it on the offensive side of the ball. Like, they start out whatever, but it was so ugly from the get-go. It was really hard. And I mean, Virginia Tech isn't a bad team right there. They're 18-3. They're a very good team and they're good on the defensive side, but there's no reason at all to be scoring 24 points in a college basketball game.
Yeah, no, it was tough, and NC State's kind of started a slide here of which they really could be on a 5-game losing streak right now if Clemson hadn't missed 4 free throws in the final minute of their game.
They got bailed out. And, I mean, you probably would have hammered NC State fans a little bit more if they had ended up losing that game. If this was a 5-game winning streak, you would be in even worse shape with NC State fans. You were kind of poking the bear a little bit on Super Bowl Sunday after that, or on Saturday, after that loss.
Yeah, I just, listen, I've got a love-hate relationship with NC State fans. They know I was never the biggest Mark Godfrey fan. When Debbie Yao hired him, I thought it was a terrible hire. And they fought me on it for a while. They actually fought me back in the day. It was even when they forced kind of Herb Sendek out. And I get it. They want to beat Carolina. They want to beat Duke. Herb Sendek wasn't doing that, but he was getting them to the NCAA tournament almost every year at the end. And they kind of forced him out in a sense. And then they hired Sidney Lowe. Were completely irrelevant. Then hired Godfrey. But NC State fans are definitely some of the most entertaining of a fan base, of any fan base, because they still have it in their head. They don't want to be that kind of stepchild to Carolina and Duke. And the bottom line is they are right now. They just haven't been nationally relevant really since like Jimmy V. So, their fans they come back at you. I mean, they let you know it when they don't like you.
Yeah, they do. And it's some pretty comical responses. If you haven't done so, if you see Jeff at Goodman Hoops on Twitter tweet about NC State, I highly recommend going into the replies and just taking a little time to sort through because it can get pretty ugly in there. But do you think they're a tournament team right now? I mean, they're sitting at 16-7, but they've lost 3 in a row. Could have been, like you said, 5 in a row if they didn't get bailed out against Clemson. They've got Pitt coming up this Saturday, I believe, before they go Syracuse and then Duke. So where do you stand with them in terms of the tournament?
They're going to be right there. They're going to be right. Selection Sunday, they're going to be sweating it out. And to be honest, I think Kevin Keatts has done a really good job. It's year 2. He didn't inherit a whole lot. I thought this would be a fringe tournament team. Some people thought, I know I talked to my boy Jeff Borzello at ESPN, and he thought they'd be top 25-ish. I wasn't ready to say that. But again, I think Keatts has done a good job. I think he's got the program going in the right direction. The funniest part of the tweet the other night, so I tweeted out for people that didn't see it, was, it was like 3-0 in the Super Bowl. And I tweeted, since when did Kevin Keatts become the offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl? And
the response you're going to get when you're looking for it when you tweet that, which is the funniest part.
The best part was some woman tweets at me and says, well, I dare you to say it to Kevin Keatts' face, and like tweets at Kevin, Coach Kevin Keatts or whatever
tags
his
him in
Twitter handle is. And I'm like, I responded to her. I said, like, I texted him right after I tweeted it. I texted him because I've known Kevin Keatts for 15 years. I used to run a prep school tournament.
Right.
Okay. It was a prep school tournament years ago that we moved all over New England, and Kevin Keatts was at Hargrave Military Academy as a head coach for years. So I've known Kevin forever. So I texted him right away after I tweeted. I said, hey, man, basically like no harm, no foul. I hope you're okay with it. I only did it because, we've known each other a long time and, it's just having fun. I would do it with anybody. Like that's, again, you call me immature. That's fine. I am. I admit it.
But it's different. It's not like you don't have a relationship with Keats or anything like that. Like from an outsider's perspective.
4 points, Chris.
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. And I think it's pretty entertaining on your part to throw something like that. And Keats is a good sport about it. He knows. I mean, it's fine.
I don't think he loved it, but the best part.
Of course, he wouldn't. I think he would be lying to your face if he said it was great.
Right. So the woman says, I said I texted him. She said, well, prove it. And then another guy jumps in. He's like, yeah, prove it.
Show me the screenshot.
Let's bet on it. I'm a DJ and I'll do whatever, I'll DJ whatever party you want. I'm like, dude, I don't really have parties that I need a DJ. Like I'm 47 years old. Like I'm not bringing you in to do a party for my 15-year-old daughter anytime soon from Raleigh, North Carolina.
You've got people yelling, show me the documents in your replies. It's pretty awesome.
And I was really close to doing it, and then I'm like,
there's not much in it for you at that point. Then you're throwing around screenshots, and Keats is like, what are you doing? Not good. So, and then in another regard, too, when, another fan base that loves you, the Johnnies, St. John's fans, they love you. And again, another notice for anyone who sees Jeff tweet about St. John's, also look in his replies, look in the mentions, because it's pretty entertaining. But the other day, St. John's beat Marquette. Big win for St. John's. Big win. Marquette, I think, was, 16th in the country?
Yeah, it was a huge one. A sweep for St. John's over Marquette.
Sweep for St. John's, right? They beat them on New Year's Day. They killed them on New Year's Day, and then they went to Milwaukee and beat them on Tuesday night. They beat them by 1 point. But, it was a close game, and I think they were down 1 when you tweeted this. You were saying, basically, what does Chris Mullins and Greg St. Jean going to draw up? And as many people who follow the Big East know, and we've talked about it on here before too, St. Jean is an assistant coach for St. John's who basically runs all the X's and O's there. He coaches the on-floor stuff.
Yes.
And you got a nice little response from Chris Mullins' son on Twitter.
Yeah, Chris Mullins Jr., somebody sent this to me. I didn't even see it. He said, why do you hate my dad? If you know basketball so much, there's a lot more to it than drawing on a whiteboard. And, listen, I have the utmost respect for his father, for Chris Mullins. Loved him as a player. Did I question the hire when they hired Chris Mullins? Absolutely. As I questioned the hire of Patrick Ewing and Penny Hardaway a little bit, not to the same extent because Penny Hardaway had been an AAU coach and a high school coach. Mullins and Ewing had no experience.
Ewing was an coaching. NBA assistant, and Mullins didn't have anything in the past. Right?
In front office. He was front office.
Yeah.
So to me, again, do they know the grind? I'm really happy, to be honest, that St. John's has become relevant. I think the sport, certainly the New York area, needs it. Like, it's great to have St. John's be relevant, and if Georgetown could be relevant too, nothing would make me happier because I can drive to St. John's. It's not that far. It's 4 hours.
Yeah,
I can get there. So I would love UConn, St. John's, Boston College, Providence, Harvard. Let them all be
get that northeast. Yeah, get that northeast prominence back. And I mean, for the Big East, of course, it would be great to get Georgetown and St. John's, and specifically Mullen versus Ewing back, because that would be pretty great to have them coaching against each other, late in that conference tournament. But I think like you said, the New York college basketball scene, they need it. Like it kind of needs a little injection there, and St. John's would be the team. That was a big win for them, man. I mean, Marcus Howard had a good chance at the end. He got Mustafa Heron to. I texted you about this last night. He got him up, and I'm surprised he didn't go into him. Marcus Howard is a great scorer.
I was thinking shocked. The same thing. I'm watching, and I'm like, he had him in the air. All he had to do was throw his hip into him.
Yeah, that's it. And he would have gotten the call because Howard gets those calls, and it would have been a foul. And he just instead he sidestepped and pulled like a lean in three and. To no avail. So big win for St. John's. Where do you stand with them? They're 17-6. They had back-to-back losses earlier in January to Butler and Georgetown. Then they came back with a pretty good win against Creighton. I still think that backcourt of Pons and Heron is one of the best in the country, and I think they'll be a tournament team. But where do you stand with them?
I love them. I really do. I like them.
Yeah.
I know they've been up and down, but I wouldn't want to play them in the first round of the tournament. Like if they're like a 8-9, you want to face Shamorie Ponds and LJ Figueroa and Mustafa Heron and Marvin Clark.
They're a bunch of gamers. They're a bunch of gamers, man.
They're tough. They shouldn't, honestly, they shouldn't have this many losses in this Big East.
No,
they shouldn't have lost. Like at home to DePaul, terrible loss.
That was bad.
Home to Georgetown.
And they lost. They kind of got robbed against Seton Hall earlier in the year in their opener in the Big East. So I agree. There should be less than 6 losses there. But they're a good team. It's the only thing that concerns me about them is their lack of depth, because their top 5 is great with Pons, Heron, Justin Simon's been great, Marvin Clark. You mentioned LJ Figueroa. And then off the bench, it's like they go, I don't know, there's Greg Williams, Mikey Dixon. There's really nothing there. And so that's the only concerning part. But this team can score with the best of them. They've been pretty, they're a bunch of grinders on the defensive side. They're tough. And they kind of remind me of a lot of old St. John's teams. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and listen, down the stretch, they got Providence twice, Xavier twice, at DePaul, Seton Hall in a revenge game at home.
It's all very doable. Like there's
3 straight home games, Chris. Providence, Butler, Villanova. So they could easily, going 2-1 on that road trip was monumental.
And they played Duke pretty well. Obviously, they were in that way in the scoreboard. They were in it, and you look at the score, and they lost by 30. But up until that last 9-minute span, they were in it.
Yeah, getting back to the tweet from Mully's son, from Chris Mullen Jr. Obviously, I'm not going to go back at him against my better judgment, because I've done it in the past with a couple sons of coaches and GMs. The first one was a few years ago. Danny Ainge's son, Crew Ainge, went after me publicly for I had been hammering Rondo, which I've done for years. Yep. I think I was the first one to start hammering Rondo, and just the fact that I was never a Rondo guy. I just was never a Rondo guy. And the other guy was Ricky Leto.
Leto. Oh man, that's
so we're still in Ricky Leto.
Like Providence Ricky Leto.
Yeah, because I said when they got him, they got him to commit, and I said it may be the worst thing for the program at the end of the day, because Ricky Leto was unreliable, and as it turns out, he never played a game for Providence.
Right, and he's short NBA tenure. He ended up over in Europe pretty quickly.
He left. He sat out a year, took their scholarship money, and then left.
That was that was like a really painful sequence for me there, because you had a couple other guys get suspended for the year, and suddenly Chris Dunn was hurt, and I could go on a Ricky Leto rant here for about 10 minutes. So you don't want to go down that road. Get back to Ainge.
Yeah, I'll get back to Ainge. So Crew Ainge, it was tight with Ricky, and I think he was a big Rondo fan too. So he went at me publicly on Twitter, like tried to torch me. So I'm like, what do I do here? So I DM'd him, and I basically said, hey, Crew, here's the thing, man. I have too much respect for your dad. I'm not going to get into this public Twitter war with you. Right. And since then, Crew and I are Crew's awesome. He really is. He's at Utah State right now, starting point guard for Utah State. He did a 2-year Mormon mission. One of my favorite kids, but we didn't start off that well. So that was my Crew Ainge story. And then Greg Marshall's son, Kellen, that was more public. I kind of went back at him a little bit. It was the year when they were the number 1 seed and ended up losing in the second round to Kentucky.
Yeah.
I would say on SportsCenter everywhere that I didn't feel like they were worthy of the number 1 seed. Number 1, and there was some history between me and Greg Marshall. I'll give you this story. It was kind of funny in a way, not funny for Greg Marshall. It was the year that Wichita went to the Final Four. Dan Patrick had me on his show, and he asked me, the question was basically, why hasn't Greg Marshall gotten another job? Why hasn't he gotten a head job? And I said, well, the bottom line, if you want to know the truth, is a lot of people really don't love Greg Marshall. In the industry, he's rubbed some people the wrong way. Well, little did I know that the next person on was Greg Marshall, and Dan Patrick introed Greg Marshall with my clip, and Greg Marshall basically responded with, well, I could say the same thing about Jeff Goodman. And I laughed. But that's fine. That's
good
funny.
response. That's a great response on his part.
Good job, Greg. Like, kill me. I'm fine with it, man. I got thick skin. Crush me. So Greg and I really didn't talk for a couple of years. We're good now, but Kellen kind of went at me a little bit.
I'm sure Dan Patrick was licking his chops listening to you talk about that, knowing that Greg Marshall's on next. He probably loved that.
It was good. Like, I don't blame, like, Dan Patrick. Who cares?
Not at all. That's fine.
I said it, man. Like, you got to be accountable for what you say. I said it. I'm a big boy. I had to handle it. And again, we're good now. But, Kellen was probably in high school, and he would go at me a bunch about the fact that I didn't think they were worthy of a number 1 seed that year because they really hadn't played anybody in the non-conference. And Missouri Valley was weak at that point. So, and it's the same thing with me, like I've said it all year with like Nevada. They won't be a number 1 seed, but no matter what, I feel like there's no way Nevada would earn a number 1 seed. They just haven't played enough. It just didn't work that way. They played USC in the non-conference. USC stinks, or doesn't stink, but they're not great this year. Yeah. So sometimes it just works out that way because of scheduling. You don't know how good teams are going to be sometimes when you schedule a year or 2 out.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. What do you think? You think like I should not go back at Chris Mullen's son?
I mean, what do you get? Like, you don't get anything. You don't get anything out of it. Like,
well, I wouldn't go back at him. I would say, hey, man, like, love your dad. Have a lot of respect for your dad. Just have a little fun with the relationship between your dad and Saint-Jean and the way Saint-Jean is such an active assistant coach.
Right. Like, you could say that. I'm not, and I'm looking now. I think he might have deleted the tweet.
Did he?
I think he did. Yeah, he took it down. I'm not seeing it on here. So I think he did take it down, and so maybe you don't have the opportunity to actually anymore. But either way, it's kind of interesting to see, Coach Buddy Boeheim can't really do that with his dad, considering he's on the team. But it's kind of interesting. You talked to him last week, the week before.
Yeah, last week when they were in Boston.
Yeah,
awesome kid story. I mean, any 18-year-old, or he's probably 19 by now, who will say publicly, like, my dad's my best friend, and his dad's 74. 74. Like, it's not like 18 to, like, 45. Like, my daughter, I'm 47, my daughter's 15. Like, that's a regular age gap or semi-regular.
Buddy and his dad have it. There's a pretty wide gap there.
And Buddy says, he's like, yeah, it's tough for me. He goes, I check out Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and all I see is people saying, like, you shouldn't be on the team or you're getting minutes when you shouldn't be. And he's finally starting to make shots. They got blasted last night to Florida State.
Right.
But he's finally starting to make shots. And the best part was I asked Jim, I'm like, because I talked to Jim about it like 2 years ago in the summer, year and a half.
Yeah.
When he had him committed, or he hadn't even committed yet, but he knew he was going to play for him. And again, they're super close. And I asked Jim, I'm like, so how's it been? How's it been coaching Buddy? He's like, I hate it. I'm like, what do you mean you hate it?
Really?
It's like, yeah, I hate it. It's so hard. He's like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, as a coach, and then I got to think on the court as a father. And he's like, it's hard when your son's like the eighth guy right now. He's not the best player, and he may never be the best player. So, he's going to have a little bit of a challenge. Because, like, a kid like Jalen Carey right now, who's a freshman, talented, top 50 player, is not playing. And Buddy is.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that dynamic, And these guys are bitching. And I said this to Buddy. I'm like, what's it like, guys after the game bitching about your dad and the, playing time or what this and that. Frank Howard didn't play down the stretch.
It's kind of an awkward situation.
So he said, I just kind of sit there and deal with it and don't really say anything.
That's fair. Good for him. I mean, it's tough. Yeah. He's playing like a little over 10 minutes a game, I think. But you're right. He's starting to shoot a little bit better, and that's his role. He was known as a shooter. He's going to be that shooter off the bench for them. But does create some interesting scenarios when you got Jalen Carey only playing 14 minutes, and it's kind of
minutes have gone down lately. Like their minutes
significantly flipped. Yeah.
The Big in Big Wireless Provider stands for a lot of things. Big contracts, big bills, and big fees. What Big Wireless doesn't want you to know is there's a way to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month. Introducing Mint Mobile, the game-changing company that's taken everything wrong with Big Wireless and made it right. Mint Mobile makes it so easy to cut your bill down to just $15 a month. You can even keep your old number along with all your existing contacts with any Mint Mobile plan. There's no more paying for unlimited data that you'll never use. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, plus free shipping on your Mint Mobile SIM card, go to mintmobile.com/podcast. That's mintmobile.com/podcast. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month and get free shipping on your Mint Mobile SIM card at mintmobile.com/podcast.
All right, so now let's jump over to the Jayhawks. Kansas sitting at 17-6. They've got their big man, Doak, is out for the rest of the year, so they're kind of struggling to find themselves right now. Starting with a loss on January 19th to West Virginia, they've lost 3 of 6. They lost on Tuesday night to Kansas State. Bill Self will right this ship. I'm not really majorly concerned about this team, but let me know what you think, because when I see this team, I see them play. If they don't have everyone going at once, they're in trouble. If Quentin Grimes has a bad game, or LeGerald Vick or Dedrick Lawson has a bad game, they drop. And if they don't have everyone working as a unit, they've got that small margin of error, which kind of makes me a little bit nervous about this team. Where do you stand with Kansas, and do you think they're in any trouble right now?
Well, I think the biggest advantage we thought for Kansas going into the season was power and numbers, right? And now they're so thin. And, people were just kind of assuming Charlie Moore, he's going to fight with Dotson for the point guard spot because he averaged 13 a game at Cal. No, he's a backup guard.
Yeah.
KJ Lawson. They took him because he's Dedrick's brother.
He's with
Dedrick, not really good enough. He's good enough for the American or, Conference USA to be an impact guy or something like that, but he's not good enough to be an impact guy. So losing Doak, losing D'Souza.
What are your thoughts on that D'Souza situation, real quick?
Oh, he got screwed. He got completely screwed. I just don't think those international kids have any idea what goes on. I think they do what they're told when they come over. He comes over from Angola, and I'm sure he had a guy who helped get him from Angola to the U.S. He ends up in Florida, a couple different prep schools, and he's just listening to his guy. Whatever his guy's telling him to do, he's doing. And initially he was going to go to Maryland. Then I think he wanted to go to Kansas. And then from what I was told, his guardian said, all right, you know what? You want to go to Kansas? I'll get Kansas involved. And his guardian that wanted him to go to Maryland at first.
Right, Maryland, yeah.
So I just think, listen, the guardian took some money, from TJ Gasnola, who was working on behalf of Adidas.
Yeah.
And do I think that Silvio D'Souza really had much of a clue what was going on? No, I think he was getting money from the guardian.
Yeah.
The guardian's giving him a couple hundred here, there, whatever you need to make sure that, number one, the kid probably had money. Number two, that if the kid made the NBA, that the guardian was going to be taken care of down the road. Ultimately. But I just, like Brian Bowen, that was a little different, and maybe it's just that I've seen so many of these foreign kids come over and get taken advantage of. And people would say, well, taken advantage of, what do you mean? They're given much better opportunities than they would have got back home. I get all that. I understand it, but they still get screwed in a sense that they don't get to make their own decisions. They feel indebted to the people that bring them over, so they do whatever those people ask them to do, tell them to do. And no, I don't feel like Silvio D'Souza really knew what was going on with Adidas, with TJ Gasnola, with his guardian, and getting a penalty like this was way too harsh in my opinion.
Really unfortunate, yeah, because we're on the same page there. I don't think he knew, and it's just an unfortunate situation that rubs me the wrong way. But let's jump back to Kansas itself. So do you think they're in any trouble losing 3 out of 6 here?
They need Marcus Garrett back. I mean, not that he's like the end-all, be-all, but he can guard.
He'll help.
Here's the thing. You lose at Kentucky, no shame. Played them okay. They were never like going to beat them, but they were like in that game the whole way. Lose at Texas, to be honest, no shame. Like, maybe you should win it, but it's not a bad loss. Lose at Kansas State, no shame whatsoever. The only one that you can look at and say, all right, a bad loss at West Virginia.
Yeah, that's really it.
That's really it. Look at their other losses this year, okay? At Arizona State, at Iowa State, again, at Kentucky, at Texas, at Kansas State. Their schedule is pretty good down the stretch. So
it is.
As I've said, don't be surprised. I still think they win a share of the Big 12 title. I
really,
because
obviously a lot of people are pulling Iowa State as their favorite right now. But you're right. I mean, you look at this. People here, they're losing 3 out of 6, and their big man's out for the year, or whatever. But you're right. You look on KenPom, and only 2 of those losses are above 50, and one of them was Arizona State, who's ranked 54th in KenPom, and obviously the other one that you named was West Virginia. They're 104. But the rest was Iowa State, Kentucky, Texas, Kansas State. Those are all good teams. So there is no shame in that. And if I trust any coach to right a ship, it's Bill Self.
It wouldn't shock me if they finish out. They got 8 games left.
Yeah.
6-2. And again, some of these other teams are going to lose games on the road. And again, they're going into like that final stretch at Oklahoma and Baylor at home. And some of those teams slip up and they end up in like a 3-way tie with Iowa State and right. I don't even know who else it'll be. Texas Tech's tied with them right now. That's the crazy part. If you had told me Kansas and Texas Tech would be tied for 4th right now,
I told you were nuts.
Nuts.
Yeah.
So
ridiculous.
I'm worried about them. Here's what I don't think. I don't think Kansas can win it all.
Yeah.
I think Kansas could have won it all with Doak.
Right.
And, Doak and, I guess just Doak. I mean, if you add Doak to this team, I think they're capable of winning it all.
They are.
I'm not sure they do, but they're in the mix to win it all. Now, I don't think there's any chance that they can win it all.
I don't think so either. And it's, again, another crazy thing. If you had told me at the beginning of this year, Kansas probably won't be able to win it all because of their lack of depth, I would have told you were nuts, because I was raving about their depth at the beginning of the year. They had a great set of transfers coming in. They had some experience in it. It was not going to be depth that was going to be their issue.
You thought, like many, Charlie Moore was better than he is. I saw Charlie Moore last year. See, I saw Charlie Moore and KJ Lawson practice last year, and I was like, they're just pieces.
I thought KJ Lawson would play a bigger role as well. Yeah. And, of course, you've got Marcus Garrett, who they need back, and Doak's hurt. So there's a multitude of reasons here. But speaking of concerns, let's go to Tom Izzo and Michigan State. What's going on there? Because, of course, they lost Josh Langford for the season, but they were already playing without him. But suddenly and suddenly they've lost 3 in a row. They dropped to Purdue, which no shame there. Purdue's a good team. They lose to Indiana in overtime when suddenly Indiana decides to show up out of nowhere after they had lost 7 in a row, 8 in a row, and then they lose to Illinois on Tuesday night by 5. What is going on there?
Nick Ward needs to get his head out of his you-know-what and start playing. He's had 10 rebounds in the last 3 games. 10 rebounds. 3 games.
He can't.
I mean, this is supposedly one of the best front court players in the country. He's hard to rely on. And you got Cassius Winston and a bunch of other dudes that you just don't know what they're going to – like Matt McQuaid's a great defender, but he's a catch-and-shoot guy. And he's averaging 7 points over the last 3 games. Aaron Henry.
Suddenly they need him to score more.
Yeah, like Josh Langford. Everybody was like, not everybody, but a lot of people, when he went out for the season, I think I tweeted out, I'm like, a huge blow. And people texted me like, no, they're better without him. And I'm like, I get that they're right. I get that they were like 7-1, without him at that point. But I felt like it was going to catch up to them at times because you need that consistent number 3 scorer that if Nick Ward does play like he has lately, you've got a Josh Langford that Cassius Winston can rely on.
Yeah, they need to turn to him. I mean, they played well without him, but there's a difference between playing well without someone and being better without someone. There's a major difference there. And I mean, Nick Ward, if he's going to be hot and cold here and showing up and not showing up, Josh Langford is a guy who gave you close to 30 minutes a game. He scored 15 points a game, and he was that reliable, like you said, third scorer, and they need him because Matt McQuaid isn't going to get you that 15 points a game. He's just not. He's a catch and shoot
not every
guy.
Night.
He just can't do it. He could spark for 23 if he has a hot shooting night, but it's sporadic, so you can't rely on him or a guy like Xavier Tillman or anything like that, like you could Josh Langford.
But I feel like Michigan State's come back to like what we thought they'd be, which is like a top 10, 15 team. But people put them, Michigan, same thing, in that elite group, okay? And to me, I'm back to where like there's like 4 teams in my elite group. And that's, Virginia, Gonzaga, Duke, and Kentucky. Those are my 4 teams that are probably, if you told me at the beginning of the year, those are like my 4 teams that I like the most. And, Kansas probably being in there if they had a healthy Doak, right? If they were 100% with Doak and D'Souza, I probably would have had 5.
Yep, makes sense.
Now I got 4, and Michigan State are in that next tier.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, I'm sure they'll be okay. You're right. They kind of came back to where we had put them. It's just not. It hasn't been pretty in the last week or so. And they've got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Rutgers, Michigan. So they got Michigan twice. I forgot they hadn't played Michigan yet. So those will be interesting towards the end of the year. But they still have about a month until their first matchup with them, so they can straighten things out. But let's stick with that top 4 that you were just talking about. Biggest matchup of the week, bar none, is this Saturday. You've got Duke and Virginia going at it once again. So they played in the middle of January, and Virginia lost 72-70 to Duke. Do you have any because, I mean, you watch guys like, we'll talk about this. You spoke to a lot of guys who have defended Zion Williamson so far this year, and we'll get to that. But Zion is so much better than everyone else, and Duke is realistically better than most teams they play. They're so talented and so good, but their shooting concerns me. Duke hasn't shot the ball this poorly from the foul line and just from the floor since I think it's like the late 90s.
Yeah, probably ever. I mean, seriously, they're just not a good shooting team.
They're
and
not.
Everybody was like, early on, I remember after the first few games, everybody's like raving. They're like, "Oh, Cam Reddish, an elite shooter." I'm like,
right.
No, he's not.
He's not that. He's not a consistent enough shooter to be called an elite shooter.
No. Yeah. Heck no. They don't have one on their team, and
right.
Their best shooter is Alex O'Connell, and it's hard to get him on the court because you need those 4 freshmen along with like a legitimate rebounder, so you don't play Zion at the 5. So that's why you got to have either Bolden or Delorier in there with those guys. So I think Virginia gets him as long as Ty Jerome plays in this game and is fairly healthy.
Yeah.
He's banged up right now, but I think they get him back in Charlottesville. I'm not sure that Duke has seen an environment like this yet. These guys, like who have they played that they're going to have this type? Like Charlottesville is very, very underrated as an atmosphere.
It
very
is.
underrated.
I mean, Notre Dame wasn't that crazy when they were there because they took them out of it pretty early, and they were in Pittsburgh, which isn't great. They went to Florida State, Wake Forest. I mean, you're right. This is probably, and before that, they had no away games in conference play. It was all neutral and home games.
This is the big one. The next
you're
two,
right. This is the big one.
The next two are going to be big.
Right. They go to Louisville after that, right? But
Louisville's not that talented. Like Virginia's much more talented. They beat a different Duke team last year in Cameron. But I think this will be their opportunity. They didn't shoot it well at Cameron. I think Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, DeAndre Hunter. I just feel like if Duke wins this one in Charlottesville and Ty Jerome is healthy, that's a major statement. Major statement. Because Virginia has owned – you got to remember, Virginia has legitimately owned the ACC regular season for the last almost 6 years.
Yeah.
Owned everybody.
Yeah.
They're better than 10 games better than Duke and Carolina. It's amazing.
It's incredible, yeah.
Yeah, I just – and for Virginia, I think it's important, again, just to kind of get that confidence that they can beat anybody. And beat this Duke team because who knows? They could see each other again in the championship game. It wouldn't shock me at all.
I would hope so because I really, really do enjoy this matchup. And, of course, UVA thrives off of their defense. But let's talk about this. You've got your piece coming out. It's coming out on Thursday, correct? The Zion Williamson
Yeah. It's coming out on Thursday.
So you talked to some guys who have defended Zion this year. What were some of the things that stuck out from talking to players who've defended this phenom, this almost mythical creature that is Zion? How'd that piece go?
The biggest thing for me was that every one of these kids, I talked to 12 of them, 12 primary defenders, because there were like 5 teams that have played zone. So you can't even talk to those teams because nobody really defended him specifically. Not a one-on-one matchup. Right. So the coolest thing to me was not a guy on the team, not a guy that he went up against, said anything negative about him on or off the record. They were all complimentary about him, how hard he plays, how he conducts himself. I asked every one of them, like, did he talk any trash? They're like, no. Which
is wild. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Like, imagine being that good and not talking any trash.
Yeah. Really,
That's
really,
wild.
really cool. Really cool. And I asked them for comparisons. Nobody has a good one. There is none. There isn't.
There really isn't.
One guy, Jacob Kessler. Kessler was from Army, and he was actually really good. He was good, quote, and very very smart in how he said, like, we talked as a team, and the 2 guys we came up with were like a combination of like Julius Randle and Blake Griffin.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. I mean, that's as close as you're going to get, because he does remind me, of course, he's far more. Blake Griffin was really athletic at Oklahoma.
Freakish.
Zion Williamson is probably more athletic if you look at his size. I mean, he's 6'7", 285.
I like the Blake one the best, Chris.
Well, yeah, because he has the same style that Blake did, because he kind of puts his head down and bull rushes people, and he's effective in doing so because his footwork is so good, and he's so athletic, and he has got such a good touch around the rim. But I think that's going to be one of his bigger adjustments when he gets to the NBA. Of course, there's not a lot of criticisms that you can have for Zion, but it did take Blake a little bit. Of course, he's a very good NBA player, but it took him a little bit to adjust because he got away with doing that a lot at Oklahoma, similar to Zion. And I mean, he can just go into the paint and kind of bull rush you, and then he tosses up that little floater from around the free throw line, and he's got such a good touch, it goes in every time. So I think that might be a little bit of an adjustment.
Chris, think about this.
Yeah.
Blake Griffin, in his 2 years at Oklahoma, made a grand total of 3 3-pointers. 3 3-pointers in his entire college career.
How many does Zion have right now?
I think he's made 12.
12?
I'm pretty sure he's made 12 this season. He's shooting like 29% from 3, something
12,
like that.
And he's 22 games in.
Do you know what Blake has made this year? Just this year in the NBA.
How many?
124 threes.
Damn.
He's shooting 36% from 3, 124 out of 342 from 3.
Unreal.
So you mean to tell me that Zion can't be a 35% three-point shooter if he works?
Hey, man, I have no question. He has shown he's got the work ethic. Motor and work ethic has never been that man's issue at all, that kid's issue.
That's what I'm saying is, like, I don't know. Like I hear it was funny. The first person that made an outlandish statement about Zion, do you remember Stephen Marbury tweeted something that he was going to be like LeBron? Like he might even say,
I think it was Stephon Marbury. I think you're right.
It was Marbury. I can't remember the exact tweet. I'm gonna have to go back and get it and apologize to Steph because I called him out for being like a moron. And now, to be honest, you can't, because I'm not sure he's gonna be LeBron again. But I heard like Scottie Pippen say it last night, and these are like high level NBA players at one point in time, and they're all putting him in the same category of like LeBron. He could be LeBron down the road or something, like, he's going to be a different player. We know that. He doesn't have the passing ability of LeBron, but he could be generational in a sense that nobody's going to be able to stop him. He plays so damn hard. He's so athletic. He's so strong. As long as he stays healthy, who is going to be able to guard him one-on-one in the NBA? Who's going to be able to keep him off the glass? Good luck.
Right. It's not possible. I when I was watching the St. John's Duke game on Saturday, I was sitting there audibly saying, like, he looks like he's playing against boys, like little kids. He's just so much better than everyone else on the floor. And you're right, Steph. The quote from Stephon Marbury, I've got it here, is Zion is going to destroy the whole planet. He's way better than LeBron, and it's not even close. he don't have to touch a basketball, and he's better than LeBron James. I said that.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, again,
Wild.
I think that's kind of insane that he's better than LeBron.
But to have someone like Stephon Marbury, who's a great player, say that, I mean, it's unbelievable.
And again, Pippen, I heard him say, he's the best player to come along since Michael Jordan.
And that's Scottie. That's Scottie Pippen saying that.
Right. Now, again, LeBron, I don't know if he included LeBron in that. I think he was saying including LeBron. I don't know. But again, whatever the case, the guy has been absolutely sensational. Now I'm bought into the fact that I do think he is the National Player of the Year. He's going to get it regardless of whether I think it or not, because the combination of his exploits and how he plays and the fact that he's with Duke, that combination is going to get him National Player of the Year. But I think he deserves it. I do think he deserves it. I mean, as long as he keeps this going, which I don't see him hitting any wall at the end of the day. This dude ain't hitting a wall.
And if he does, he's going to punch right through it. That dude is so big, there's going to be no issue there. And he'll go number one. I mean, if there's any doubts about his NBA game, it doesn't matter. No one's going to pass on him at one for the sole purpose of marketing. Do you know how many jerseys whoever drafts him is going to sell?
Yeah, my former Myron Metcalf of ESPN tweeted out something last week, and he said, like, Zion's going to sell more jerseys than anybody else in the NBA next season. And people were arguing with him, and I'm like, no, he's right. Like, he's going to sell more.
He's 100% right.
Like, KD, and part of it will be the novelty, right? I mean, a new guy like him, but part of it is the fact that, like, we haven't seen anything like him. It was like, like KD's fun.
Yeah.
But
he's not Zion. Zion is this phenom, and he was like this viral sensation for the last couple years at Spartanburg Day. Like, he's got this whole aura to him. It's kind of fascinating.
And you know what? The aura, part of the aura, is he's likable. He's super likable. Where KD right now, I love KD. I've known him forever. But like a lot of people, KD is not likable right now to a lot of people. I don't quite understand. Well, I do understand why. I don't agree with it.
Yeah, he just kind of rubs some people the wrong way. But but you're right. I mean, Zion, you can talk to people who maybe don't think Zion's going to translate to being an NBA player or don't think he's going to sell the most NBA jerseys next year. But you're right. No one says I don't like the guy. That's not a problem.
To be honest, even though he's at Duke, do you hear anybody saying
that's the part that bothers me, because I was born and raised as a Duke hater. I have never liked Duke, and even R.J. Barrett and Cam Reddish, I like those guys too. This is a very likable class, and I like Jones. I have no problem, and it's really hard to root against Zion, and that's gonna. It's almost kind of similar to Luka coming into the NBA this year, because I don't know anyone that doesn't like him. He's a very likable guy, and that's why he's been so marketable for the Mavs. It's that likability factor.
All right. Well, listen, big game. Virginia at home against Duke Saturday night, 6 o'clock. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. And remember, you can subscribe to the Good and Plenty podcast, which is every Tuesday and Thursday. You can do that wherever you listen to your pods, iTunes, Stitcher. You can find me on Twitter at Goodman Hoops. What's your Twitter handle, Chris?
At Chris Grenham, just straightforward.
You can also find me on Stadium, watchstadium.com. Again, the full story on Zion and all the best quotes from the dozen players that I talked to that actually went up against Zion. That'll be on watchstadium.com. And also I'll tweet that out on Thursday. But thanks for joining us again. And we will see you next week on Good and Plenty.
Hey, sports fans, I'm Coach Nick of the B-Ball Breakdown podcast on the CLNS Media Network. I break down the NBA from a coach's perspective and have some of the best basketball minds join me weekly to discuss the latest NBA news and what's truly going on the court. Subscribe to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast wherever you get your podcasts or find us on clnsmedia.com. It's a great conversation. You in?